Hi everyone, my name is Jason from Camps with Friends, and we are a online directory where parents can search through currently around 18,000 businesses, everything from summer camps to after-school enrichment activities. And today we are talking to Angie from Breakwater Expeditions, and I'm excited to talk to her because you guys run a business that's a little bit different.
Yes.
Why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, so Breakwater's been around since 2012. And so we started Breakwater. Actually, I've been with Breakwater since 2017, and I am now a co-owner. And some of the founders are still owners of the business, and they founded Breakwater because all of our backgrounds are wilderness therapy. So we were working with families and youth at risk, all in the outdoors, and really trying to get those individuals and families to recognize more about the family system and the patterns and the relationship that they are building together. So the founders decided that they wanted to reach more people than just this like small industry in the wilderness therapy world. And so they created Breakwater. So Breakwater started doing family trips, parent-child trips, and things like that. So since then, we're still doing that. And then we've broadened our offerings for individuals, groups. We work with a lot of different professionals for themed trips, and of course, our teen program in the summer.
Right. And that actually, like I mentioned, that kind of covers my second question as well about how long you've been around and your inspiration and stuff. How many
Yeah.
how many trips a year do you do?
Oh gosh. Let's see.
You
On
can ballpark it.
average,
Is it a
yeah.
hundred or is it 10?
No, on average, I'd say we're in the 20, sometimes up to close to 30 trips per year. And that would include anything that would be like from one night to 6 or 7 nights and working with any population. So I'd say about on average 25 to 30 trips. And that's with um two owners that work full time with the company, and we contract guides to work anything that we can't cover.
Let's dive straight into some of the expeditions.
Mhm.
Like, what do you guys do? And where do
We
you go? And tell us a little bit
Sure.
about it.
Yeah, so we our foundation is expeditions. So the definition of an expedition is going into the unknown, um, and relying on the group of people and the gear that you have. So that means we've developed course areas that we can do that in. And so we like to say that we follow the sun. So we operate year round from Alaska to Florida and in between. And these are mostly water based. Uh, because when Breakwater was founded, it was important for us to do water based activities because anyone can float. Um, so not everyone can wear a backpack or climb a mountain. So canoeing, sea kayaking, and then we also have Yellowstone National Park that we guide in, and that's backpacking. Our trips are mostly camping, and that looks like with all the gear. So we have everything for people. So most of our participants are brand new to camping. I wouldn't say that our participants are the people that are like climbing Mount Rainier on a regular basis. That's not, we don't guide for those people. We really want to provide flat water, beginner access to just really get people out into these spaces. And anybody can do that. And that's really what we believe.
Yeah. So let's jump into 2024. Let's
Mhm.
presume that a parent is considering something for their kids over the summer 2024. What would that, firstly, where would you be going in 2024? Is this accessible to parents, all over the country, people from Canada, maybe, etc.? If they were to send their kids down there, let's talk a little bit about safety and then also, what would that sort of expedition from their home. Let's say they're from, I don't know, from Texas or New York or whatever the case is, and they're going to fly their kids somewhere.
Yep.
And then, where are they going to end up and how they're going to get there and what's that going to look like?
Sure. Yeah. So overall, we offer 3 trips for kids in the summer. These trips are lined up so that they're about I think it's about 2 days in between each trip. So families can do more than one trip. So the first trip is our River and Rocks trip, and it starts and ends in Salt Lake City. So every one of our trips has a airport that we pick up from. And depending on if there's people who drive, we customize a pickup or kind of figure that out with the person that would like to. Sometimes
That's a little easier.
Yes, I'm up in North Idaho. So if anybody from Spokane, Washington, or anybody on my drive to Salt Lake wants to save a flight, we often pick kids up if it's in our route. So we start and end at an airport. So we do a pickup there. We travel in a 15-passenger van. And then we start the itinerary. So for Utah, Salt Lake City, we drive to the Green River and we start out with a canoe expedition. When we get off the river, we have our van there waiting for us, and we travel to Moab, Utah, where we spend a few days camping outside of the city, and we do some canyoneering in the local slot canyons. And then from there, we make our way back to Salt Lake City and drop off students. And then any students that are continuing to the next adventure will stay with the guides and transition on a drive to Bozeman, Montana, where our second trip starts, which is called Boots and Paddle. So Bozeman, Montana, pick up students, and then we transition on to a backpacking expedition in Yellowstone National Park. From there, we get off the trail and we get in our van and we head to a Bozeman hot springs where the students get to shower, they get to soak in a hot spring. There's usually live music happening at this campground hot spring area. And then we transition to the river, Missouri River, for another canoe expedition. From there, we transition off the river into Missoula, Montana, where we have a whitewater rafting day. And then those students fly out of Missoula, Montana. So Bozeman and then out from Missoula. Any students transitioning with the guides for the next trip, head up to Sandpoint, Idaho, where I am, and we switch out the canoes for the sea kayaks. And then we transition to Seattle to pick up the next group of kids. And those kids will go on to the San Juan Islands, which is north of Seattle at Anacortes, Washington. And we do our sea kayaking expedition. And then that trip ends at the Seattle, Washington airport.
What are those dates, sort of start to end of those?
Yeah, so without having it right in front of me, it starts June 27th at Salt Lake, and it ends, I think it's July 29th. And you can find those details and all the itineraries on our website.
Yep. Can you talk a little bit about the growth or transition that you might have seen over the past few years, or even in your career of doing this, as a dad with a 14-year-old daughter and an 11-year-old daughter? I can imagine if this is a first time camping for one of my kids, they're probably completely apprehensive and anxious at the beginning. But for the kids who do get to experience this, what kind of journey and growth have you seen in some of those children?
Gosh, all kids are so unique and also so similar at the same time. I would say nowadays, with technology, the biggest fear or thing that kids are most nervous about is not having their technology, their phones.
Like disconnected.
Disconnected. Yeah. And so we're pretty sensitive to that. So we have a pretty good conversation in enrollment about what the habits are for that student with their phones. Now, there are still kids out there that are really like, I could care less about my phone. I'm happy to leave it. But then there's others that like, well, when do I get to use my phone? So we have those conversations with the student and the parent ahead of time. And what that does for us is sets up a comfortable atmosphere that the kids are aware of their phone use. So we don't, so they know when they get their phones back because they know when they get service again. Our trips are unplugged because it's remote. There is no cell service. So I would say the transition for the student is almost always anxious to start. They're nervous. They are coming in on their own. They don't know who they're going to meet. Are they going to be friends with anybody? Will anybody like them? All of those things are super normal. And then what we do is we just slowly transition to the group into learning about each other. And so for kids that have never camped, we're teaching all the skills in the beginning and then helping them help each other to continue to build on those skills. So some kids are really good at some things, and some kids, it takes the whole trip for them to learn, like packing a backpack. Some kids are just, their stuff is everywhere. So the kids that have stuff everywhere, other kids start to are affected. So within the peer environment, they're really helping each other learn about how they are affected. So in other words, they are really working that out for themselves with not a lot of stuff from the guides, because they're teaching each other like, well, when you have your stuff everywhere, we're always looking for something before we can leave. And then those students start to realize like what that effect is, and they want to be accepted and they want to do better. And it's more peer-based. So they're bonding, they are learning, and they are not feeling shame or criticized for these things that might be a huge struggle in their daily lives.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So talking about you being disconnected, let's talk a second about the anxious parent who may
Yeah.
be worried about their kid, or want to, I don't know, communicate with them or see photos or anything like that. What do you guys do to put them at ease, but then also safety wise, like if you were to get into some kind of an issue,
Yep.
what would you be able to do about that?
So first let's talk about safety. So the destinations that we go to are frequented by breakwater. So we're doing the same section of river, we're doing the same hikes, where our guides are well aware of that landscape.
And the
Two,
challenges that they may throw
yes,
up.
they can predict what's probably going to happen very easily. Um, and the guides, because they can predict, they know what gear to bring. For instance, Yellowstone, we can predict that there could very well be a lot of bugs. So let's not forget the bug tarp, even if we never use it.
Yep.
The other thing is our guides are medically trained. So wilderness first responder certification is basically, for anxious parents, I just describe it as it's an EMT when the hospital is more than 200 miles away. And so we're trained in that capacity. We also bring satellite phones, GPS units,
Oh, wow.
and the guides are checking in with me as the course director. I like to say, depending on our group of kids, it can be like every other day they might check in. So parents, if something were to happen at home, are able to communicate with me. And let's say grandma's sick and they're really concerned, and they want the guides to know that that might be an issue when they come back into the front country. They might have to tell their kid. So I can prep the guides and all of that and communicate those things. So parents feel like they can know where the kids are. It goes both ways. Um, yeah, and so when we come off out of the backcountry, the guides always ask the kids, hey, here's your phones, check in with your parents. This is the time frame to check in.
Yep.
So parents will know the time frame that they will probably hear from their kids.
Okay.
Uh, yeah. And I
That's
set
great.
that schedule up based on the
Awesome.
itinerary for the
Awesome.
parents.
Yeah. So obviously someone's motivation to go out on this kind of an expedition, or your motivation as well, has probably got a lot to do with um, education, right?
Mhm.
And nature preservation and things like that. Is that a big part of what you do and your motivation, and how do you sort of give that message over to and educate the kids?
I think that's where Breakwater stands out. Because we are a small company, it's really important that we are tailoring programming to where the kids are at.
Mhm.
So we do not have like an education curriculum that by the end of it, every kid is going to be able to tell us about the history of Lewis and Clark. Now, I think this is important because so many of our kids are constantly in school being told all this stuff that they have to learn, they have to know, they have to be interested, they memorize it. For us, it's all about finding what interests the student. Is that interpersonal skills? Is that history? Is it nature? Is it animals? And once we start to figure out what those students are most interested in, we take those strengths and we build on it. So we've got some kids that are choosing the Yellowstone boots and paddle trip because they want to see wildlife. So let's talk about the wildlife. Let's learn about the bison. Why are the bison here in the park, but we didn't see any on our trail? Why are they migrating? When do they have babies? All of that stuff comes up in a really natural way that becomes interesting to the students. And that one student is seeking the information, and all the rest of them are listening and maybe joining in as well. Goes for the same thing with Lewis and Clark, learning that. So our teaching is educational. We are teaching enough that they are learning how to paddle well, they're learning how to backpack. We're teaching the skills that help them live in the backcountry. And we're sprinkling in all of this really fun, interesting information as they are engaging with it, because that takes some time. They want to socialize, they want to play, but then they're also like, why does that happen? Well, let's figure it out. And anything we can't answer in the field, we're like, write that down for Google. So we're teaching them to use their phones also when we get out to correlate back to what they saw.
That's great. That's great. Now, I know that you said that you're not going to be doing your Costa Rica trip coming up in the new year, but this
Mhm.
is this is something that you do. Is it something that you do every year?
Well, so Costa Rica, we've been trying to incorporate a winter trip for students.
Mhm.
And I've done a few winter trips with like young adults. This year, we have decided we want to start offering a winter break trip for teens. We think Costa Rica is a really easy place to travel, and safe for our itineraries and our students. And it's really important for young people to start learning how to travel. Um, and and this is a front country trip. They're not camping. We're staying in hotels and vacation homes, and we're doing really fun activities. So it is the adventure, zip lining, night walks, things like that. And we've played around with the dates, but I think we're sticking to the December right after Christmas and coming back right after New Year's. So the idea is that if a teenager has a break and they don't want to spend the whole time sitting at home, maybe they can go on a small group excursion to Costa Rica.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so we've done other Christmas trips like Everglades, and we've done Texas, Big Bend. But I think Costa Rica is where we want to focus our energy for winter. I think kids
At least it'll
nowadays.
be warm.
Yeah, exactly.
Big Bend will probably be cold in December.
Yeah, yeah,
especially at night. Um,
yeah,
Great. I mean, that's really great. It's such a cool thing that you guys are doing. It's just, from a parent's point of view, it's just a matter of getting comfortable with the idea, right? Of
yes.
sending your kids away and being comfortable with that whole concept. And um, at this point in our lives, I don't think that mom is going to be up for sending her daughters away. But
Yeah.
maybe in a few years we can talk her into it, or even maybe do a family trip, like you mentioned.
Yeah, so that's the other alternative with we get a lot of families that are like, I don't know if they really want to do that, or I don't know if they're ready to, like you said, your 14-year-old,
Hmm.
really not ready to do that far away.
Yeah.
And that's really fine. That's where the customization comes in. And like I often encourage families like, well, what about sending the siblings? We've had sibling trips
Mhm.
where the two siblings go together and
Okay.
do a short little backpacking trip or overnight trip. So that's where we get to play with the needs of the family, the needs of the kids, and really tailor it to them. And within our teen trip itinerary, um, we're we've even had family trips meet their kids at the end and do a family trip. And then that student gets to teach their family what they just learned.
Yeah, that's really great. That's really great. Well, Angie, what do you want to leave people with before we end? Whether they watch this video here in the next week or if they watch it on YouTube in a year or two's time, what do you want to leave with them?
I think the biggest takeaway with doing a trip like what we offer is trying to remember that the camping and the outdoor part is probably the scariest, but it's also the easiest to learn for students. The biggest takeaways that happen at the end of our trips is like the confidence kids walk away with, the resilience, their ability to just like smile and play and see their faces, not in their phones.
Yep.
That's really what the parents talk about when their kids come home. Um, and it's a shared experience with peers that will never be repeated in the same way. So it's
Yeah.
very unique for them. And I
Yeah.
think everybody should try it at least once.
That's really great. That's really great. Well, besides finding you on campswithfriends.com, where what are your details?
So you can find our website is breakwaterexp.com. And you can also email info@breakwaterexp.com. So everything's there on the website. You can contact us and reach out, ask your questions. There's no dumb question.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Angie. Stick around after I stop the recording. We'll finish up after that. But
Okay.
thanks for joining, and we wish you the best of luck going into 2024.
Thank you. Thanks, Jason,
Awesome.
for having me.